cloud. Okay. As soon as I see it hit 2 o'clock, I'll just put the video on. And I actually, maybe should we stop our videos while this video is on? Yeah, I'm gonna do that too. I'm gonna do. Hello, everyone. My name is Liz Garrity. I wanted to just take a moment and introduce our third webinar of the five series webinar. Sorry, 5-session webinar. Today is going to be about beginner lessons, and we have the great pleasure of having Shala Naimi. She's a program manager for Google's Applied Digital Skills program, and she is based in New York City, and she is one of our wonderful contacts that COABE has been working with on the Google side. So I'm going to just turn this over to her. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to let her dive right in. Welcome, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, Liz. And thank you everyone for joining. We do have the group chat going, so feel free to say hello, where you're from. I see a few people have already done that. As Liz mentioned, I've been working with Google and specifically around the work that we've been doing with COABE. I had the very distinct pleasure of being able to attend the COABE annual conference this year, which was fantastic. And got to meet a lot of different adult educators, maybe some of you even. But if not, I just wanted to say hello. So I'm actually going to turn my video off for the rest of the session and then really go through the rest of the webinar. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen as a starting point. Great. And hopefully everybody can now see my screen. As we've done in past webinars, we're actually going to be presenting a Google slide show going through a lot of different items. This is a resource that will continue to live on the COABE website, so you're able to access it. You don't have to memorize everything, but we're going to be recording both the webinar and also providing you with all of these slides afterwards. So hopefully this is a really nice introduction for everybody. We've been really excited so far. If you'd like to follow along with the presentation, we recommend by going to the Applied Digital Skills website. You can do that by going to your browser and typing in g.co/applieddigitalskills/COABE. It's not case sensitive, so it doesn't need to be capital letters, but you can just go right there and you'll see the front page of our website, and you can kind of follow along. Today's session is going to be really interactive. It's going to be really focused on giving you some hands-on experience with some of our lessons, and hopefully we'll have plenty of time for Q&A as well. So this is, as Liz mentioned, the third webinar that we're doing. It's part of a series of 5 different webinars, totaling 5 hours. I just wanted to go through and give you a little bit of a background as to what we're going to be covering in all of the webinars. My colleague Tara has, over the last couple of weeks, shared 2 different sort of trainings with all of you. The first one was really around, what is digital literacy? What is G Suite and its apps? And what is applied digital skills? What are we really talking about here when we are talking about the applied digital skills curriculum and lessons? The second one was really about getting started with lessons. And today's session will be focused on some of the beginner lessons. We have at this point, over 250 hours of lessons that you can choose from. That can be done in as little as 45 minutes with students and as long as, over 10 hours with students. And so what we really wanted to do over the next couple of weeks is dig into some of those sample lessons that you might consider getting started with your students that are specifically created for the adult education space and adult education students. So we really recommend that if you haven't already seen the first and second webinar, you go to the COABE website and you check those out. That website is www.educateandelevate.org/Google. If you go on that site, you'll see a whole list of the entire schedule of lessons, but you'll also see the archived webinars. And right now it's just session 1 and 2, but soon it will also include session 3, which is actually today's focus. So I'll pause there for a second and really kind of dive into, what are we doing today? So today we're going to be covering several different things. The first one is going through a little bit of an overview of how you find lessons. This is something that we went through in greater depth in previous workshops or webinars. And we're just going to do a very brief overview for folks today. And then we're going to spend the rest of the webinar period going through 4 lessons, what we've kind of deemed beginner level lessons. The first one is called Digital Tools for Everyday Tasks. The second one is called Start a Resume. Third is called Edit a Resume, and the one we will be sort of ending on is called Send Professional Emails. So you can get a sense of what we're actually going to cover just from the lesson titles, but we're going to get into a lot more detail over the course of the next 50 minutes. So how do we find lessons? So essentially how you find lessons is by going to our website, and I'm going to try a little experiment here, so hopefully this works out nicely. But you go to the website, as you can see here, and you actually click curriculum. Once you click curriculum, you're going to see a lot of different lessons. Just so many different options to choose from that you can review and sort of pick, what do I want to get started with my students today? And what we actually recommend is that you try filtering some of the lessons. Today, for example, we're going to focus on adult learners. And what this will actually do is, of all of the 55 lessons that are available today, and this is a number that's always growing, it's actually going to just show the selection that's specifically made for adult learners. And that's 19 lessons as of today. So what you can actually do is use those filters to go through and decide that, oh, here's a lesson that I want to focus on today, digital tools for everyday tasks. There are other lessons that you can go through as well, and other types of filters that you can use. For example, let's say you want to focus specifically on communication. This will filter by the specific communication-oriented lessons. You might also say that I specifically want to focus on job skills. So that will filter through the different job skills as well. Your students might specifically want to learn how to use Google Sheets, to learn how to make worksheets and budgets, and do data analysis. So you can pick that filter. So this is, essentially how you find lessons, and how you can kind of take a very long list of lesson options and narrow it down to something that you might want to get started with immediately. So I'm going to go back to our presentation. All of our lessons, specifically for adult learners, come with what we call lesson plans. And these are really great resources for teachers specifically. So for all of you who are all on the call, the lesson plans go through the learning objectives, the total duration, and the materials that are required for the lessons. It also includes a lesson outline. So it takes something, very large like project management, and it breaks it down to what are the 7 different components of that. It also has some recommended prep and other items like tips and assessments if they're relevant. And it's broken down at the individual lesson level to also include kind of sub-objectives, teacher notes, which often also include, really scripts that you can use in the classroom live with students, as well as project outcomes. These are examples that our team has created to show, what is an example outcome, what does an example project look like for each of these different lessons. So jumping right into why we're here today, we're going to be going through, as I mentioned, 4 different lessons. The first one is called Digital Tools for Everyday Tasks. And this lesson is specifically focused on kind of making your life more efficient by communicating through email, using internet search, and creating documents. It's a great beginner level lesson for adults, and we estimate that it takes anywhere from 4 to 9 hours. And one thing that we often say, and always like to reiterate, is that the time period is really kind of individualized. Our lessons have been created to be self-paced, and you know better than us that some students will breeze through and might take 4 hours, might take even less, and other students will take more time. They'll need more time and more support to get through the lessons. When it comes to literacy, but in particular digital literacy, the range of comfort with digital tools can vary so widely in a single classroom that we really like to focus in on providing you with a recommended range or time period for a lesson rather than dictating exactly how long it can take. This will allow you and your students to take it at whatever pace works best for them. So in Digital Tools for Everyday Tasks, you can see that there are different skills taught and different apps taught, including Google Docs, Google Drive, Gmail, and internet search. So that's google.com. It is specifically kind of focused on communication and research at a very basic or foundational level, and really focused on helping students who may not have had a lot of prior experience with different digital tools to start to get some experience and some comfort with them. So this might include creating an email address for the very first time or working in a document for the very first time. And so jumping right, I wanted to go ahead and show you the lesson itself. So I'm navigating now back to the main website and back to our curriculum page. And I'm just going to scroll down and I'm going to look for this lesson called Digital Tools for Everyday Tasks. And here I found it. So this lesson is broken up into several different sub-lessons. This includes an introduction, creating a Google account, i.e. an email address for the first time, recording and sharing ideas for things to do using a document. So really getting comfortable with document formatting, writing and typing online, and sharing that with other learners so that you're able to comment on each other's documents and learn from each other to really make it as interactive as possible. It also includes searching for activities and terms, so conducting internet search for the first time, and then emailing your friend or a classmate and learning how to specifically send an email and insert a file as an attachment. And then it wraps up with kind of personalizing emails, replying to emails, formatting them, and managing your inbox overall. So that's what you can find on this specific lesson page. And so what I want to actually focus in on is taking you through a lesson plan. So if you open the lesson plan document, which you will always find on the left-hand column of a specific lesson, so right over here, it will open up a new tab that I see some folks are already inside of, but it opens up a new tab that is completely customizable. This is a Google document that you can go ahead and make a copy of. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'm going to make a copy of it. I'm going to name it the same thing. It's going to go ahead and automatically create a new copy of it. There you go. So this is I'm going to rename this document. I'm going to call it Shala's copy. And then what I'm able to do is actually go ahead and customize this entire lesson plan so that I'm able to add additional instructions in it. I'm able to add or remove different sort of sub-elements. And so this actually enables me to really take this resource and make it my own and make it specific for my students. Maybe I want to add the date, or maybe I want to change a lot of different things, but that will be up to me, and then I can go ahead and share this new version of the lesson plan with my students. So every single lesson plan, at least at the template level, includes several different things. It includes learning objectives for the entire lesson. So as we can see for digital tools for everyday tasks, there are 5 key learning objectives. The first one is to create and set up a Google account, to create a document to record and share ideas, conduct an internet search and record those search results in a document, email a friend, a family member, and include an attachment, personalize those emails and manage the inbox. And so at the very end, if a student was to complete all of the different, the entire lesson, they should be able to come out with these specific new digital and soft skills. And so that's, really at a high level what we imagine this lesson is sort of focused on achieving. What you'll also find is the total duration of the lesson, the materials that are needed, the lesson outline. This is something that is just really a remarkable resource that a lot of different folks ask us about. One of the reasons why I think we love the lesson outline so much is specifically because we know that, in a single classroom setting, you might go through the introduction and creating a Google account, but let's say that you don't want to cover emails with your students. So what you're able to actually do is just remove that section of the lesson. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove it right here. Oops. Gonna delete this row so that my students are only going to go through these 5 sections. So you're really able to customize the lesson plan as you see fit. You're also able to take the very large 4 to 9 hour period and break it down into subsections so that you can do it over the course of multiple weeks or multiple class sessions. It also goes through prep. So this is really everything that happens before your students are in the room. It's turning on the computers, making sure that there are tables and and desks available for the students. It also goes through an overview of the lesson plan itself. How is it structured for you, the educator? And then it sometimes will include different assessments or tips and tricks as it's relevant. After that, what it really goes through is breaking down each of the different lessons into specific learning objectives and teacher notes. So one of the things that I really love about the teacher notes is that it's really it can be a script that you can customize. So in this case, it goes through the welcome and the introduction to your students and what they can expect. It also prompts students to think about, how using the internet and digital applications might help them complete tasks in everyday life. And so it really starts to engage your students into what they should be learning and discussing on that day. And so again, you can customize all of this. You can add discussion questions, you can remove discussion questions, but this is really supposed to be a resource for you as the educator that you can then take and customize as you see fit. So you can use this as sort of a sample script that you might bring into a classroom. So I'm just going to go back to this specific page where my lesson is actually located and go through and share with you a very brief example of what you might expect in a lesson. So in this second lesson, what a student actually does is create a Google account. And so in the first video, they're prompted to set up a username. So I'm actually not going to play the video, primarily because it might be a little bit difficult during a webinar to stream it. But I wanted to show you some specific features that you and your students would be able to access and to have for each of the videos. The first one is actually on this right-hand panel where my screen or my mouse is located, which is a set of instructions. And so all of our videos tend to be quite short instructional videos so that students can always rewind and rewatch, but also really focus in on as few tasks as possible in a single video, so that's as manageable as possible. So at the end of this video, the instructions that are given to students are to open a new tab, to use the Google Apps menu to access the account page, and then to actually create an account with a new username. And so that's what this specific sublesson prompts students to do. Some of the other things that your students would be able to use while watching these videos is to change the playback speed. And so what this really does is make the video slower, faster, whatever is best for your students. For students who may not be as proficient in English as others, this is a particularly useful feature. Similarly, there is a running transcript that will actually highlight as the video goes on where the where the actual speaker is located. So I would be able to specifically see that, this is the line that the speaker is on. So what this really enables is for the student to be able to read the information, to slow down the information, and to also be able to see the information through the video itself. So it allows for a lot of different types of input that can be very helpful. One of my favorite features is also just to add in captions, which I think is often very helpful for many students who are still maybe learning English or just could use that extra level of support. Awesome. So I'm going to go back to my presentation now. So as I mentioned, the lesson Digital Tools for Everyday Tasks covers a lot of different kind of introductory or beginner level tasks in Google Tools. So that includes creating an account, using documents, and emailing at a very high level. And so you would be able to take this entire lesson and break it down into a single day of workshops with students, or you could break it up into specific different classes that you have, focusing in on, particular skills that you want your students to learn. So if you want them to only learn emailing, then you can look for, a 50 to 180 minute period of time where they're really focused on learning how to email and getting comfortable with email specifically. Great. So I'm going to jump into the next lesson that we're going to be focused on. And this is actually pretty similar to as a great follow-up actually to digital tools for everyday tasks. Because once a student has, an email address, once they know how to email a little bit and how to conduct search, it is sort of a great time for them to create a resume, an online resume. If they haven't had one already, it's a great sort of next step for them to be able to take. And so what the lesson Start a Resume does is exactly that. It helps students start a resume. What they do is pick a resume template from Google Docs and then actually learn how to take that template and make it their own. That includes changing the headings so that, for example, it includes their name, their experiences, and their goals specifically, as opposed to sort of the template text that's available. I think many of you have seen probably a lot of resumes out in the world, and resumes can actually be pretty difficult, I think, to organize effectively. And so by relying on a template and showing students specifically how to find a template, it can be a huge time saver. And also just look really professional and nice. So we highly recommend, whenever possible, kind of starting your students out with a template. So as I mentioned, the Start a Resume lesson helps, with this very practical life skill of resume writing. And in that process, it teaches students how to format documents, how to utilize a template, how to make different headings, and a lot of other really great skills. This is a lesson that can be done in as little as 45 minutes. And we generally recommend 45 to 90 minutes for the lesson. Again, the entire purpose of this lesson is really to just start the resume. It can be edited down the line, and we'll go through another lesson that's specifically focused on editing the resume. But this lesson is really focused on just taking that first step of starting that online resume using a template. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into that specific lesson. So what I'm going to do is actually go back to the curriculum page. I'm going to go and filter by adult learners. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and also say that I'm specifically looking for job skills. And I'm going to go ahead and find this lesson. Great. Here it goes. It's called Start a Resume. And so you can see this lesson tile. I'm going to press View. Great, and now I'm in the lesson. And so what I can see here is that this short lesson, or this 45 to 90 minute lesson, covers a lot of different things. It includes an introduction. It includes choosing a resume template, adding contact information, adding your work experience and describing that experience, any educational sort of opportunities you've had. And then it includes another really wonderful thing called a reflection. And so I'm going to actually jump into these two things, reflections and extensions, in a little bit. But first, I want to take you through, as I did with the other lesson, the specific lesson plan. So again, the lesson plan is a resource for all of you educators, and it goes through the objectives. So by the end of the lesson, these are the main objectives that your students would be able to learn. This includes choosing a resume template, filling out personal information, and including the experience that your students have had. It also includes answering essential questions like, how do I find a template? And how do I use a template that's professional, that really helps me meet my own goals? It also includes, ways that you can personalize that template for your specific job hunt. So that's really at a very high level what the objectives of this lesson are. And it also includes, an entire section on the digital skills that your students will learn. So that, as I mentioned, includes locating and opening a template. It includes deleting and replacing text in a template. The template text is often in Latin, and my name is not in Latin, so it helps you actually change that information, and how to can delete something and replace different text. It also teaches cutting and pasting text, creating bulleted lists, placing the cursor in the correct location, using the enter key and the backspace key, and then saving the file as a PDF. A lot of job websites or e-printers will require that you print or that you submit your resume in PDF form. So it's really important that students know how to do that. So it goes through how do you actually take that wonderful resume that you started and save it as a PDF so that you're able to attach it in email to an employer or print it out or whatever it is that you might need to do with it afterwards. It also includes terms and concepts. This particular lesson includes some terms and concepts that are really important for students to learn, so it specifies those at the very beginning. This includes the backspace key, the word template itself, the term bulleted list, and a hard return. And then as we saw with the other lesson plan, it includes the total duration, the materials required, and then sort of a full lesson outline. And so what I wanted to do next is kind of jump into something that you will see in a lot of different lessons, which is something called a reflection and extensions. And so a reflection, so I'm going to go ahead and click this. A reflection is kind of exactly what it sounds like, which is an opportunity for your students to reflect on the lesson that they've just gone through. This is information that you would be able to see on your end as the educator. So when you set up a class and your students are conducting or going through a lesson to create a resume, at the end, they come to this reflection. And what they're really able to do is take a look, take a step back and ask themselves, before finishing this lesson, how successful was I at the tasks below? Maybe I was really good at finding templates. Like I knew totally how to find a Google Docs resume template, and this is something that I already knew how to do. But maybe I wasn't so great at cutting and pasting text. So this is something that, maybe I knew to some degree, but didn't really, not really a skill that I had. So it enables students to go through before the lesson and reflect on these different tasks. And then it asks them again, after the lesson, how successful were you at those different tasks? So they're really able to reflect on the lesson and the new skills that they've learned. And you're able to, as the educator, actually see what those responses are to get an understanding of what did my students learn and how much more confident do they feel conducting these different tasks. It will also go through some evaluation type questions, like, did it teach me new computer skills? Was it too easy? Was it too hard? And there's sort of two main purposes for these specific questions. The main purpose is for all of you, so that you're able to get an understanding of if the lesson was too hard for your students, too easy for your students, how useful was it for your students. The second part is actually for us as well to understand if the lesson was appropriate for students and how we can always improve it. So this is sort of an example of a reflection that you would find in a specific lesson. This is fairly typical in terms of how it's formatted and what it looks like, but it is different for every single lesson. So it's important to just go through the reflection questions on your own with your students and see what they look like. So I'm just going to go back for a second. I'm also going to show you these extensions. Extensions are really great, cool resources. So as I mentioned in the Start a Resume lesson, these are all of the different things that are covered, right? It's finding that resume template, adding contact information, experience, education to it. But maybe you have an extra 15 minutes, maybe you have an extra 20 minutes, and you want to take it sort of to the next step. So extensions are specifically related to what some of those next steps might be. Maybe you want to teach your students how to change the color of the resume headings or make a copy of their resume so that they're able to have multiple copies on hand. So what you can really do is have your students go through one or more or of these different extensions and kind of build off of what they've started. So these extensions are specific for different lessons. And so one thing that I might be able to see in this specific lesson is, I want my students to write a summary statement. I want their resumes to state a summary statement about what their objectives are. So I might ask them. Just going to pause that for a second. So I want them to actually go through and write a summary statement and might assign this extension for my students to conduct. So that's really, a set of optional things that you might have your students do and really just an additional resource if you want to take it to the next level or to the next step. Awesome. So I'm going to go back to my presentation now. So as I mentioned, this is sort of a recap of the different lessons that are available within Start a Resume. And this is just sort of a screenshot of the extensions and the different options that you might have your students go through. One of the things that I really love about this is that as you go through different extensions, it will actually tell you what you've watched and what you haven't watched yet so that you're able to track your progress and really get a sense of how far you've gotten. This is the full list of extensions. I've included this list mostly for folks who want to take a look at it a little bit later. So because we're going to be providing this presentation out to all of you on the COABE website, you can always go back and take a full look at this list of extensions as you have time. And this is actually an example project that you can see has been created. So at the end of this lesson, this is something that your students might expect to have. It includes, obviously taking a resume template and this fictional character, Ashley Sierra, has customized it with her work experience, her education references, her awards and accomplishments. And so this is how Ashley Sierra has started her resume. So it's always a really, I think, extremely helpful resource to get a sense of, at the end of this lesson, what will my students produce? And so this is an example of what you would expect your students to produce. This is also a screenshot, as I mentioned, or as I showed everyone, of the reflection survey and what you can expect there. Awesome. So just to be mindful of our time as well, the next lesson that we're going to dig into a little bit is called Edit a Resume. So once your students actually have a resume, this takes that next step to help them edit their resume to make it even stronger and more appealing to employers. So again, this can be done in as little as 45 minutes. And it assumes that your students have a resume that they're already working with. They have a draft resume, and what they're really looking to do is to edit it so that it's improved. So what they learn how to do in this specific lesson is to write a resume, edit their document, and conduct online research. So we're going to similarly jump right back into the specific lesson. So what I'm going to do is, again, go back to the curriculum page. And here I see the edit your resume lesson is already here. So I'm going to go ahead and press view. And there's the lesson. And so what I can see from this lesson is that it includes updating your information, making sure that your phone number, your email address, that all of that information is up to date. Adding action words to job descriptions and specific examples to job descriptions. Really important to, emphasize some of those soft skills of explaining the work that you've done and the experience that you've had in a very effective way. So that's really what this focuses on. And then it includes a reflection as well and extensions. So we can take a look at these reflection questions. Wonderful. So these reflection questions allude a little bit to some of the specific digital skills that your students might get from this lesson, which includes uploading a file, sharing a file, adding comments to a document, and accepting or rejecting suggestions in a document. So you might go ahead and have students pair up, for example, and comment on each other's resumes using Google Docs. And then they're able to use those comments and address those comments through this specific lesson. It also includes several extensions, such as writing a summary statement, using suggestion mode, writing a cover letter, tailoring your resume to fit the language of a specific job description, which can be so helpful if the initial review of a job, for example, or job applicants is done through sort of a computer-generated search for keywords. This can be a really helpful thing to do. Oops. Awesome. The lesson plan, as I mentioned, similar to the other lesson plans we saw, goes through the objectives. And I want to spend just a moment to look at the specific objectives of the Edit a Resume lesson. So the objectives of this lesson is really to take the existing resume you have and make it more compelling. And so that includes a lot of self-reflection and discussion that you can have with your students in your classroom. So for example, you might ask, like, how can I edit my resume to make it more compelling? What are employers looking for? And how can I help, actually improve my resume so that there's a match between what they're looking for and what I have to offer? It also helps focus in on internalizing some really strong statements, such as, a resume being the first thing that represents you to a potential employer, and understanding that it takes a lot of work and effort to make an effective one-page resume. We know that every single word in a resume counts, and so really to help walk students through internalizing some of that information so that they have some of those soft skills and understandings as well as they're editing their resume, so that it's not 30 pages long, but is really as efficient and effective as it possibly can be. The lesson plan also goes through the specific digital skills that your students will learn, which include really helpful things like spell check, sharing and commenting on documents, and using a lot of different editing features that you will find so that you're able to, for example, ensure that font styles are consistent and bullet points exist as well. It also goes through some various terms and concepts that you can discuss and sort of help work through with your students, such as action verbs, editing, feedback, measurable detail, and other similar sort of terms and concepts. Wonderful. So I'm going to go back to this lesson. This is, as I mentioned and sort of shared, these are some of the various extensions that you could imagine seeing in a specific lesson. And this is an example of a project that you might find. So as you can see here, this actually shows you what the comment feature looks like. So one of the really awesome things that this lesson covers is commenting on different resumes. So whether it's you as the instructor commenting on a student's resume, oops, I went one step too early. Whether it's you as an instructor commenting on a student's resume or students commenting on each other's resumes, it really encourages collaboration and creativity and communication in editing the resumes. It's really helpful, of course, for one person to see how somebody else reads their resume. So it, really helps to kind of take it to that next step and improve a specific resume. So we can see here that there are several comments, and so a student can go back and resolve those comments or address those comments so that they're, taking their resume to the next level. Wonderful. So the last lesson that we're going to go through today as part of the beginner series is called Send Professional Emails. So this is an extremely important skill for everyone to be able to have. And it really focuses in on, learning how to write professional emails for specific workplace situations. And so it's also a lesson that can be done in as little as 45 minutes. And it really focuses in on using search and Gmail to develop effective communication and writing strategies. So students will learn those specific practical life skills, but they'll also learn some of those, digital skills like sending emails and formatting emails effectively so that, font size is appropriate for a professional setting. So I'm going to go ahead, and as I've done in the past, we're going to go ahead and find this specific lesson. Oh, so here it goes. Send professional emails. So I'm going to press View. Great. So as we can see, this lesson covers a lot of different things. It covers an introduction to sending professional emails, reviewing the parts of an email, such as the signature, editing and sending your email, and then and a lot of different extensions, which I'll jump into afterwards. The lesson plan also goes through, as other lesson plans have, the specific objectives. So these objectives include creating Gmail drafts for situations that might happen in the future so that, your students have a professional email almost ready to go when an issue comes up. So for example, if they get sick or they can't come into work on a particular day, it also helps them learn how to send an email to themselves to practice the process of writing, sending, and replying to emails. So some of the discussion questions that might come up and your students would be able to answer at the conclusion of this lesson is, how do I communicate effectively in the workplace via email? How do I prepare for common workplace situations? And then how do I handle situations better with Gmail, with an email application? So it goes through a lot of different digital skills as well, including, as I mentioned, writing email drafts, formatting text, creating bulleted and numbered lists, using the CC and BCC fields, which you can see here is down in the terms and concepts as well. So the carbon copy and blind carbon copy fields, what do those mean and how does one use those effectively? Inserting GIFs, and then searching online to find someone's email address and sending emails from the draft folder. So this is an extremely kind of useful and effective and kind of ready to implement immediately type of lesson. So what I want to do is actually jump into the second video. So I'm just going to scroll through and go through and show you this example. set of examples that you might find. So what you'll find in this particular lesson plan is a lot of different student outcome projects that include different definitions of the parts of an email. So you can see here the kind of structure. So you can use this as kind of a guiding resource for discussion with your students so that they're able to understand like what makes an effective email for if I'm running late. So this is an email that Wayne is sending to Secura saying, hi Secura, I'm so sorry for the late notice, but I'm going to be late today because of car trouble. So that means, it includes a greeting, an apology, a description of the problem. It also then includes an expected arrival time and a plan for, how Wayne is going to make up for that lost time period, lost time at work. So this is a really a great example of a professional email and the different components of a professional email for a specific challenge that we all face on occasionally. So it's really helpful to have a real example of what an email like this might look like. So you can see in this example or in this lesson plan a lot of different examples of different student outcomes that you might see related to sending professional emails. So that includes everything from thanking a team member to communicating workplace policy. So lots of really great examples that are both that are sort of immediately accessible. So I think probably things that we've all experienced on a day-to-day basis. It also goes through some of the example extensions, such as creating a signature in your email. So that includes your name, your job title, and your contact information. So it's a really a fantastic lesson that goes through, things that are really effective. The list of extensions are really robust here, including attaching documents, creating labels for specific folders to make sure that our emails are actually categorized and efficient so that it's not too overwhelming. It also includes, creating, as I mentioned, email signatures and creating automated replies. So lots of really useful extensions that can be utilized. All right, awesome. So now I'm back in my presentation. Wonderful. So those were the specific lessons that we wanted to kind of dig into for this webinar. As titled in the webinar, these are kind of what we consider beginner level lessons. So for adult learners who might not be really comfortable with different digital skills or tools, who might want support to create that first email address or conduct that first internet search, all the way to somebody who is ready to create a resume for the first time. So this is a really great set of lessons to start off with. And what we're going to be doing next week is digging into digital skills for the office specifically. That might be helpful. So we really encourage you to join next week if you can, to take that next step as to when an adult is in a job that requires some digital skills. What are some of those different tools that are available to them and skills that they should know for their workplace? So with that in mind, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment and start answering some questions.
Hi, I'm Janet. I don't think I got introduced earlier, but I am a colleague of Shala's, and I have been trying to answer some of your questions on the Q&A. So one question, Shala, was, will my students have the same access to all these files as I do, or is my access teacher access? And how do I set things up so that I'm like the instructor and my students are the users?
So that's a fantastic question. So all of our lessons are free and online, so everybody is able to access them. So as I was going through the curriculum and clicking the different sections, that's something that you would be able to do, your students would be able to do, really everybody is able to do. In terms of how to specifically set up a class so that you're the instructor and your students are your students in your classroom, we actually do have the first webinar was all about that, and it goes through a lot of great detail on how to do that specifically. So that's something that I encourage you to take a look at that first webinar because it's probably more useful than me trying to explain it quickly in 1 minute. But you can take a look at that on COABE's website. The view that a student and instructor have for specific lessons is the same, but as an instructor, you're able to access additional resources like where your students are in a particular lesson or the replies they have to the reflection assessments that I shared earlier. So that's something a student would not be able to see, but that you would be able to see for everyone in your class.
And another question was, are there assessments for before they start and after they finish to verify their knowledge?
So that's a great question. So we do not have assessments for before a student starts a lesson. We try to focus in very much on reflective questions in our assessments. As you can imagine, assessing student learning can be extremely challenging, and there are a lot of different components to it. So what we really try to do is focus on a self-assessment of what students feel more confident and breaking those down by the specific digital and kind of practical skills that a specific lesson is focused on. The other thing I will mention about that is that every single lesson is project-based, right? So every single lesson means that a student is going to come out with a resume, they're going to send an email, a professional email, so they're able to actually come out with real life projects. So you as the instructor will be able to see that, you know, Shala made a resume. That's a skill that she learned how to do. And it's a skill that she didn't know how to do when she walked into the room 45 minutes ago. So I really encourage, you know, more than anything, for you to take a look at the lesson plans and the example student outcomes to get a sense of, you know, what are your students going to be learning in a specific lesson.
And a few people have asked about certificates or proof of taking the lesson that could be printed out at the end of the class.
Yeah, that's a great question. So that I would assume that's for students then, right? Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. So actually what we really recommend, and we're going to be talking about this at the 5th webinar, it's the subject of our 5th webinar, is that students build up towards taking a professional certification that Google released earlier this year called the G Suite certification. And the G Suite certification specifically, you know, if a student has it, it says that I, Shala, know how to use G Suite in the workplace. The reason that we encourage this as opposed to anything else is that it really tests the actual skills students have. So it is a mix of multiple choice questions, but it's primarily performance-based questions. So what it does is actually have students go through and open a document and write in a document or send an email, and it assesses students' actual knowledge of that information. And it's, you know, most importantly, it's a professional certification. It abides by various legal requirements to make it a professional certification. So we really encourage that students build up towards that certification. We do have some really exciting stuff coming down the pipeline related to the certification that we will share in advance of the 5th webinar.
Thank you so much, you guys. We also wanted to remind you, if you are using the curriculum, to submit your success stories at www.educateandelevate.org/Google. We actually had our first $1,000 winner He was announced on June 1st. His name is David Christopher, and he's a program director in Louisville, Kentucky. And so he was super excited. All he did was submit a story, and he was chosen for that $1,000 prize purse. So that is something that all of you are welcome to do as well. I just want to thank our presenters again for a wonderful job, and I apologized to Janet separately for forgetting to introduce her. She is actually going to be your webinar presenter next week, so you'll see her again and you'll get a chance to read her bio. And make sure, if you are looking for the webinar recording, usually within 24 hours we have it up, and you will also receive a CEU certificate automatically, so give it until tomorrow afternoon. And we are just so glad that you guys were all here and asked such great questions and interacted so much with our presenters. Thank you so much. Everyone have a great day. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.